Hello, everyone. Dr. Ames here. This time I'd like to talk to you about Chapter 3, the Hotel General Manager. Now, the information in this chapter is meant to give you an overview of the manager's job in this industry and allow you to compare those activities to what you know about what a manager normally does, regardless of industry or sector, and so forth. And I think you'll see that there are some things that hotel managers do that are slightly different and unique to this particular sector, but also that they more or less do what other managers are doing across industries and so forth. Here are the learning objectives this time. Understand the responsibilities of the general manager, referred to generally as a GM. Describe the methods needed to facilitate good investor and community relationships, how to create an effective executive operations committee. Really, it's about the team. Apply the techniques of property management and managing your brand affiliation. Um, know something about what resources are at your disposal for professional development and so forth, because you do want to do the same thing you do in other industries, and that is give career development and so forth to your staff. Um, and in this case, it mentions trade associations. And then finally, understand how to utilize the appropriate information to build strong job descriptions. When you're hiring a GM or the talent a GM him or herself would need for their particular team. So the GM themselves that's a traditional uh, title for a manager of a medium or larger hotel. Generally, you may not need a general manager and a very smaller, many smaller operations. That might just be the hotel manager. But once you start to get some size, then you have a general manager, and that is a traditional job title. It identifies that particular specific individual at a hotel property who is responsible for the final decision making. And that decision making is in the area of very property specific operations and their policies and all the procedures that go into running the hotel property. So as you can see here, you do a lot of different things. You have to learn a variety of skills and in functional areas over time. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't necessarily go in as a hotel general manager without some previous industry experience. Whereas that's more or less true in most industries. You would go into most industries as a entry level manager of some type, unless you were some sort of expert of some type with special expertise. That might be a little different. So general manager is something that you would be able to work into over time. And so it's going to take a more experienced hand. But that doesn't mean there aren't other managerial positions available to you that you would work for a general manager in a medium or larger hotel. So as you can see here, um, we've got our tasks and so forth. Really, we're talking about the responsibilities of the GM. And so they're held accountable, and they're held accountable in what you would obviously can see are the most important areas in the operation. And we will cover these topics in detail as we move along. So, investor relations, executive committee facilitation, really the creation of your team, property management, standards modeling, uh, another way to say role modeling and so forth, brand affiliation management though, and then also some comments towards the end, in particular how to handle good community relations and so forth. So you can see there's a lot going on in the realm of the GM's scope of operations. Their responsibility is wide in many areas. Let's first talk about investor relations. Now, as we've talked about in the past, or I've talked about anyway, property ownership can take a lot of different forms, and sometimes it can be complicated. Even the GM could actually be the owner in the hotel sector. So, whoever that owner is, um, they expect the GM to be the positive influence in the areas of profitability, physical condition, and reputation. And those bear repeating. because those areas deem whether or not a hotel will be successful. The general manager is on the line to make that success happen or not. And so, again, areas of profitability, physical condition, and reputation. That's where the GM has to excel, or at least do as well as other hotels in the region and so forth, to be competitive. Um, we have to remember that a hotel is not only an ongoing business enterprise, but it is also a real estate asset, and it is a source of investment to others. And so that also accounts for why we have such widely varying and sometimes complex ownership and management arrangements, both. What is important is that the GMs must have the ability to communicate to investors and to owners about the current performance of the hotel property and the future needs of that property. So, if a GM is going to, handle management, owner, investor relations successfully, they have to have the ability to do some basic financial analysis that would is at the core of running a hotel operation. And so certainly finance is going to come into this, but this is not really higher level finance or anything. You use many different formulas to calculate different measures of performance in different ways. But at the same time, these are simple formulas, but they're things that the sector has done historically over time. And these are the sorts of level of financial analysis that any manager would be expected to know how to do. And if you don't know how to do it, there's plenty of information that you can teach yourself quite quickly and get up to speed. But these are the things that you would learn as you would come on as an entry level manager in the sector and so forth, not necessarily as a GM. So you do, when you want to rise to that next level of management and be a GM, you've got to have that ability and to do the financial analysis using basic measures of performance, many of which are unique to the hotel industry. Um, but we will talk about that as I move along through the course. Um, and then proficiency in written communications, and also effective public speaking, presentation skills. Um, because think about it, talking to a group of investors is different from talking to a group of owners and so forth. It is different from talking to community leaders and so forth. So you are required to indeed adopt those top roles of management that you know about from going through the fundamentals of management course. You're going to be a figurehead, you're going to be a spokesperson and so forth. You're going to be a disseminator of information. You're going to be a negotiator when it comes to different sorts of interplay with communities and investors and so forth. So you're going to be doing the same things that managers do everywhere, but it's going to be quite specific and quite focused on your sector. Um, the executive committee facilitation. Now, the GM's responsible basically for creating their own team, and that's what the executive committee is. It's the GM's team. And you need managers in a variety of areas. They're going to assist you. And you really have to show them that you have their best interests at heart by letting them know up front that you're going to give them professional development and indeed career development. The hotel industry is such that people can come in different areas as entry managers and move up. And they expect to learn those skills. And if not, they will go to some other hotel property and get those skills and move up. Uh, it is a popular industry and there are job opportunities. So that is one thing about this chapter that is really important that we understand. It's a competitive industry. It takes a little bit of expertise, but you're not expected necessarily to know the expertise up front when you first start, uh, which is just logical and reasonable. Uh, as you see here, um, the GM really is going to find those people that can do the job for them. And so we're really talking about picking the heads of departments. And each one of those people would then be the manager of those departments. They would be akin to any first line managerial position. And so they operate in various areas of administering the property and its operations. Um, the GM is also going to be responsible to hire those people and to train them and to give them mentoring and so forth as they need it, and indeed to have leadership qualities that will motivate and inspire them. So when it says develop and nurture a team, that's exactly what the successful GM manager will do. And he will convey to that team that they are important to them and so forth, because we learned when we study management that we have to delegate because managers are generally overworked and put in too much time. And that delegation not only allows a manager to move off some of its workload, that person's workload, but also give a chance for an employee to develop professionally, to learn some new skills, to get some responsibility, maybe, and possibly. So you develop and nurture your team, your line staff members. Everybody is on the same page. We're working as a team. You're trying to achieve the hotel's goals and priorities. And those are something that the GM, like I've said, is going to measure with financial analysis and so forth to see how is performance today as compared to yesterday and historically, whatever day we want to compare to. So the emphasis is really on the EOC development. And the executive operating committee, uh, this is really the core group of people, again, that the GM is going to rely on. Now, the fact is, the GM wouldn't be able to operate a medium-sized or larger hotel without a really good, competent team, because there are many complex services that have to be offered, and there's a lot of things going on that require certain team members to stay at the front desk, for instance. You simply can't leave the front desk unattended. Um, and there's going to be more departments in larger hotel operations. So certainly the EOC, the Executive Operating Committee, is going to be larger, more department heads. We're really talking about the group of department heads of all the different functions that the hotel has to provide the services and level of amenities and so forth that it says it's all about. So larger properties probably have more departments, or at the minimum, they're going to have not just more departments, but they will be larger than smaller properties would. That's just logic. Um, so that does speak to a variety of different contexts that a GM might be operating in, depending on size and complexity of operations. Um, and think about it. When you look over what these duties are here with putting together the executive committee, you can see that these are really the things that any solid HR manager would be doing. So there again, we have the notion that the GM is going to have to wear many hats and have a variety of skills and develop those skills over time. Well, once you appoint your own HR manager, that's a valuable team member that you can learn from and that you can also have that burden taken off of you, some of this stuff. You're still going to develop your team and nurture it, but on the other hand, you can be assisted now by another trained professional in that field to get that job done. Um, so you have a variety of positions to fill, and just like I've been saying, the human resource manager is one of them. You can see obviously that they're going to be the point person to handle the hotel staffing needs. And so you'll communicate with them closely and so forth and let them know the types of jobs, and they can handle that. You're probably going to need an assistant manager to help you, that you can delegate those tasks that you simply don't have enough time. And in fact, you are training this person to be a GM themselves at some point in time. So the AGM stands for Assistant General Manager. You'll probably want to hire a controller if you have any size type of operation. A controller is a financial position. A controller is often a job title we give for the person that runs the finance department in any given organization. And then certainly, as you can see here, they're going to handle the accounting, keep track of hotel assets and liabilities, and all the things that you would expect out of your finance department. And then the DOSM. This is an important position in the hotel hierarchy, and certainly a very important one uh, for the GM to have an excellent person in, the director of sales and marketing. This is someone who is handling the revenue production on site and the as well as the marketing promotions that go along with that, specific to your hotel and so forth. So you would expect that the GM is going to work closely with that human resource manager, that they're also going to work closely with that DOSM. Now we're also going to have a few other managers. We're going to have a front office manager, and that front office manager is going to be that person either in the office right behind the front counter. They might be behind the front counter themselves. They're going to be directly related in guest services and sales and so forth. And so they might also be in that office behind the front counter, which is being run by the new entry level assistant manager or assistant front desk manager and so forth. And they're talking to vendors and strategic partners and so forth, and talking about sales matters and so forth. So they are in that chain of command between the GM again, and maybe that assistant manager standing out there doing the customer representation with guest services. Now, the revenue manager is going to have a specific role where they control the pricing of the rooms and so forth, and what rooms do we have and what types and things like that. And so that is their area of expertise. We will have someone running the housekeeping department called the executive housekeeper. Generally, now you may find a few variations, but the hotel industry has more or less solidified around these very traditional titles that for them are functional titles that have been used for a long time for the most part. And so you may have a chief engineer, but in some cases, for instance, in some smaller operations, it could be maintenance, the head of maintenance. But a chief engineer would imply that maybe you have a larger operation and that you've got more things going on, such as a complicated boiler heating, air conditioning system for a large building with hundreds, maybe even thousands of rooms. And so the chief engineer, obviously, the physical facility is what that person is going to take care of. Um, let's see what else we have here. The food and beverage director. Now, think of the revenue streams that you would be gaining in any given hotel operation from food and beverage. And so it's extensive enough where you're going to have a manager who's going to handle that at all. And so this would be everything from filling the vending machines to handling the room service and maybe running the dining room or having control of the bar and things like that. If you have these sort of amenities, you're going to probably have a director of security. And this is security for the employees, for the guests, for the overall security of the property and the safety of the property in general. Sometimes the public doesn't always see these people, but in any kind of larger operation, there are some there. They have to be there and so forth just to protect people. Um, it is just not possible for the GM, as you can see, to be in all of these departments at the same time, taking care of all these many functional duties and so forth. And any given GM may have expertise in some areas, but not in others, depending on what your background in the industry is as you've worked your way up to that position. So it's reality, like in any industry, that upper managers do rely on the expertise and the skills of the people that they hire. And that's why it is so important that GMs get a strong executive operating committee, a group of talented managers who are dedicated to doing the job and who help you get the best possible performance out of your hotel property. Um, so, and when you look at the research and success stories by successful GMs and so forth, many of them can point to one or more people in their lives or background in the hotel industry who took the time to show them the ropes. So it is very much one of those things where The industry is unique to itself. It feels like it's doing a certain thing, and it's recognized when you have expertise and so forth. Um, so either you fit in this sort of atmosphere or you don't. So when you're putting it together, one thing that you have to have as a GM that's incredibly important, and this is no different than the sorts of things that you have to have at any sort of middle level manager or higher, um, or any manager in particular, really, when you talk about it, good listening skills, certainly. Uh, if you're going to be successful, if you're going to be efficient, you've got to learn to listen to people. And you want to particularly, like I've been saying, listen to people with the skills who have the talent in areas that you do not. Well, develop good listening skills and you will learn things. Um, you will get an ability over time to evaluate and implement that training. So much of what you will learn and find out as you go along is practical knowledge. Just like really much of the stuff that I'm talking about and have been so far in the course is very practical knowledge on what is going on, what is the nature of the context, and so what is the context of the hotel industry and so forth. What is today? What we're really talking about is what is the context of your job as the top person, as the general manager. Listening skills certainly comes in there. When you're working with your staff, and we're talking about that context in particular here. So you've got to be able to take the things that you know are true about working with people, motivating them, and so forth, and you've got to apply them. And the hotel industry, when you start to learn the measures of financial performance, for example, you have to employ them, and you have to do those things on a daily basis. And then you have to remember that that team you've put together wants to grow as individuals, but also as a team as well. You want the team to grow and be stronger so you can rely on them. You're building trust, but you're also offering them professional growth and personal career development and so forth. And so that's important that you do that when you're at the top, particularly in this sector. So just being a manager in the hotel industry uh, really is very similar in so many ways to being a manager in other sectors of commerce and so forth. But then at the same time, it's also very unique with its own terminology and hierarchy of authority and so forth. But here is a review of some management basics. You could see here that these are things that all managers do, and we teach them, of course, in fundamentals of management. You plan, you organize, you lead, and you control. So here it's staffing and directing. In the context of the hotel sector, when you're leading, you are staffing and directing. But the idea is exactly the same, to provide leadership in the your efforts to staff, in your directions and the things that you do and interact with people. That's why you talk about something like developing good listening skills. Good leaders can do that. And then controlling, that's really evaluating, isn't it? And controlling is really gathering the right information, analyzing it, and then making that business decision. Well, it's no different in the hotel sector. The business decision is everything is fine. Okay, maintain status quo is the decision. Ah, things are a little off, a little behind, a little ahead, whatever it is. Alter the current strategy, a minor tweak in some process in the operation, some part along the way. So you're doing the same things as far as a GM, as far as one of the managers reporting to the GM. All of those individuals are doing the things of management that you've learned about management. So let's talk a little bit here about property management. Uh, Property management is incredibly important. In this sense, you're talking about the GM's responsibility to ensure that you have effective guest property safety, that you have security programs that are in place and documented. And so, one of the first things about managing a property is keeping it safe and secure. Um, and then that has to be first, maintaining security and the safety of the property and its operations. Only then can you move ahead with other things that you would normally associate. And that's why I start with that. And that's why I emphasize it by repeating it. Um, once you've done those things, then you can think about, what do I need to do to ensure revenue is flowing the way it ought to be. So you are going to lead that revenue effort, and you're going to do it through your EOC, which you have recruited to be a really strong team to help you out and to maximize your efforts and so forth. And so it is your responsibility to manage the revenue efforts of the entire property, and that team will help you. Your emphasis has got to be on always on increasing your market share. If you're in the hotel business, you've got to continually improve operations and grow your operations so that you can increase your market share. It's incredibly competitive industry. So you have to optimize revenues wherever possible. Do the things that you can reasonably provide and that reasonably do, but don't do things that you can't reasonably and easily provide and do, because you want to be successful in all the things that you do. There's your brand image to think about, as well as revenue streams. So you always want to be able to provide top quality service, or don't give that service. And so as that GM, you are responsible for managing quality sales and quality service efforts. That will optimize your revenue, because people will come back and they will talk to others about your efforts and how excellent you are at taking care of people and so forth. So that is one big way to optimize revenue, is simply treat people right, make it a quality visit on the level and perception, of course, of your guests. Now, the activities that a GM ought to do all relate to the success or failure of the hotel reaching your financial goals. And so the GM ought to work closely with the accounting department to answer questions like, were the hotel's average daily rate targets achieved? The ADR, average daily rate. Did we achieve our targets for today, for this day of the week, this month of the year, and so forth? ADR is that average price at which a hotel sells its guest rooms. Now, you've been to hotels and you know that they have different prices for different types of room. But the average daily rate is just that. It's an average, the average price at which you've sold your hotel rooms on any given day. That's one measure of financial performance that a hotel GM is going to be on top of daily. Um, how do you figure out what that ADR is, the average daily rate? Well, it is your total room revenue plus the total number of rooms sold. That's your average daily rate. Um, you're also looking to, divided by your total number of rooms sold. That gives you the average daily rate. So how much money did we take in? How many rooms were sold that day? You divide it, it gives you a number. That's your average daily rate. Now you can track that number over time and compare it to other performance. And then your RevPAR achievements are another way that you have to find out, am I managing the property successfully or not? And so RevPAR, this is room revenue divided by the rooms available. So how much revenue did we take in divided by how many rooms were available? That is different by how much money did we take in, revenue, divided by the number of rooms sold. So how many available is not the same number as the rooms sold. These are two basic measures of hotel performance. And these are ones that are important in the industry, that are tracked all the time by hotel managers. So besides tracking the basics, and there are quite a few others that we will talk about, I will talk about with you throughout the course. You've got to do a few other things that require certain skills, talents, if you will. You've got to have some organizational skills, understand the basics of organization, and really you've got to be able to be the leader of the team. In that sense, you've got to be a sort of a coach, maybe a little bit of that in your leadership style. You have to be able to do the basic financial analysis skills, and then you've got to go beyond that and look at that information and say, what does it mean? You've got to be able to analyze it and see trends and recognize trends when you see them, and so forth. This is something that you will gain over time. You will be able to tell if you are doing well or not well, and that will start to give you a sense of what your analysis means. That's really what analysis is all about. It's a form of assessment where you start to go through that process of discovering what does this mean. Um, it will help you to anticipate the guest needs into the future so you can plan better. And then when you get into a situation where maybe another business makes you an offer that we would like to have a convention, what kind of negotiation can we have here to get a particular room rate? You can look at your data, your ADR and your RevPAR, and you'll know if you have enough rooms available on that particular time period, and what do we normally get, and so forth. So you can anticipate guest needs as they come along. And then, of course, you've got to be someone who wants to compete. So competitive spirit certainly is. You've got to want to beat the competition. And after all, that's why you go into any business in any sector, not just the hotel sector. So you do have to have that desire, though, that you want to win. So you have to do all the things that it takes to have success. Um, and in particular, to make that all happen, it does take that attention to detail. Um, there's simply no doubt about it when it comes to that. What we find is that besides the competitive spirit and attention to detail, you're going to need a little physical stamina too, as well. Um, you can see that these skills not only fairly specific to the hotel industry, but could also be applied to managers in many service industries in general. You're going to be talking about these sorts of things when you provide a service to people. So, what is this idea of standards modeling? Well, it's simply in the textbook and in this particular sector, standards modeling is the same thing that we know as role modeling. And we already know that managers are on display all the time. You are a role model when you're in authority, when you're out in front, when you're speaking, when you're in charge. People are analyzing your behavior. Your team will be analyzing your behavior and your performance. Um, your behavior, the way you do things, what you say you're going to do, and then what you actually do, all of those things reflect the standards that you have for yourself as an individual. And then that, of course, does reflect the standards that you hold for your operations, for your property, and for succeeding, and so forth. And so when you have high standards that are ethical, that rubs off on your subordinates, and so forth. So you want to be consistent. You want to be down the middle, actually. And so when it says even temperament, that's not a bad quality to incorporate into your managerial leadership style. Um, the ability to take a deep breath, go with the flow a little bit, try and read the dynamics, and then again, go back to that notion of good listening skills can save you a lot of embarrassment, but can also help you make the best decision in the end. Um, and then certainly, if you're going to be in this industry and you're going to be at the level of a general manager, you better embrace and believe in the commitment to guest service. And that means wow service, going above and beyond and doing what it takes. People remember their bad experiences in the hotel sector. They talk about them for years, and it never does your brand any good at all to have a lot of negativity out there when you have the ability to look at these sorts of when situations do arise that are negative in a sense for maybe your guest. It could be the great opportunity for you to show how great you really are. um, and so that really does, I've talked about it just a little bit on the sides, this notion of brand affiliation. You want to monitor the level of quality and service that you're providing all the time. So you're going to continually monitor how you're doing in those areas. Your operational standards and so forth are important. Most hotels in the United States are affiliated with various recognizable franchise brands. I mean, most of them, not all. We have all sorts of, obviously, smaller independent operations or places that are niche operations that are of a certain size and so forth. But there's one of them in one place, and they're not really maybe well known except to certain types of travels and so forth. But in general, most hotels in the U.S. are associated with some franchise brand. And we know what many of these brands are, the Hampton Inn, Comfort Suites, Best Western, Holiday Inn, Express, Ramada, Hyatt, Fairfield by Marriott, and so on. They're just, we could go on, and there's so much competition. There are so many brands. And certainly your brand is the most important thing about your organization. Um, so the GM must continually monitor the standards of your operations to make sure that your property lives up to your brand affiliation and builds that brand affiliation with a sense that when the consumers, your guests, interact with you, um, they're feeling like they're getting a great value and great service. So, in effect, you are maintaining the standards of the franchise. And that is actually part of any contractual agreement for a franchise that a franchisee enters into with a franchisor, that you maintain the standards of the operation. Uh, and as well, the GM must communicate effectively with the franchise brand, the contacts, the people with that organization, those officials who are really have the last say if you're a franchise operation about your marketing and sales programs. So this idea of managing your brand affiliation, it may be not entirely under your control, particularly if it is a franchise. You will have to make sure that you stay within the limits of the things that you've agreed to contractually. And so you are, though, expected to improve the profitable operation of the hotel by using the services and programs offered by the brand itself. So if it's is a brand affiliation that you're affiliated with it in a franchisee sort of way, you've got to go along with the things you agreed to, but you still have to remain profitable and make it work. And you have to embrace the things that come down from the parent company to you. Um, Another part of this is quality inspection scores. Um, these are really referred to as QA scores, quality assurance. Um, and these are the result of annual, or if any given hotel property wants to do it more often, they can. It doesn't have to be just annual, but a lot of times it's an annual thing that are done. It's an inspection that's conducted by the franchise company. So that's the owner of that brand affiliation that you may be actually working with under a contract as the franchisee. And so that franchisor will send out an inspector whenever they wish, more or less, but it's probably going to be a well scheduled thing so you know when it's going to happen. It's not like a surprise attack or anything, and it shouldn't be considered that. But these QA scores, the quality assurance scores, they're used in rating the property, in the marketing efforts. And again, we're talking about from the franchisor, the parent company, the brand owner. Um, and so their property ratings, the marketing efforts, and they're also used by whoever the owner might be to partially determine the GM and the other hotel manager's compensation and bonuses. Because the GM, particularly if he's working in a franchise sort of relationship, may not get to be the final word on a promotion or an increase in salary or something for one of the EOC team that he has. And he may have to get approval from the office of the franchise company. And so the relationships could vary, though, and it may not be that case in a different franchise. So relationships will vary, and they can be as complicated as the companies want to make them, honestly. Um, what skills are required? Well, obviously, you could see again, you've got to do the things that a manager who is in a position who has to talk to horizontally and vertically, communication when it comes to that, actually. You've got to have really good interpersonal skills. You've got to be a figurehead, a spokesperson, a disseminator of information. You've got to be able to be a negotiator. Sometimes you may have to persuade people, convince people. So there's a little bit of coalition building and political activity, some skills there. Certainly listening skills, like I've mentioned a few times, absolutely paramount that you know what people are saying, that you really are listening hard enough that you understand it, because sometimes we do tend to think about what we're going to say in response and we miss something, and our poor listening skills prevent us from really hearing what we should be hearing, and we miss it and then wonder later why our response was not really the one that solved the problem or the best answer. Um, and then let's talk just briefly here about community relations. Um, Really, it's because you have to be good at this because so many people rely on and use hotels. They tend to build a reputation of the given community that hotel operates in. So a community wants the hotel operation to have a good reputation. It wants to be associated as a community, as a place where this well recognized and well liked and respected brand is located. And so, in that sense, these relationships should be nurtured, and they should be cultivated over time. And it is the responsibility of the GM to make sure that you have good community relations. Um, the hotel operation might really contribute a lot onto uh, how the outside world might view the community. That just that interaction, uh, that experience the guests have there. Um, So these service activities by a hotel are influential in attracting tourists and business travelers to that community where they will spend their money on other things. And so there are types of opportunities where a hotel could assist a local community. That would include things like, well, they could maybe just by being there and their scope of their operations, attract some other new businesses by cooperating and working together in a local effort to provide a good tourist experience. So, in that sense, you would be expanding tourism opportunities, and you would support the community when they had a plan to expand tourism opportunities in the area. Certainly, that would be of benefit also to the lodging operations, because the lodging operations, remember, include other things like food and beverage and so forth, and all those other revenue streams. Um, Certainly, a hotel is in a position to provide some input regarding local community business needs and so forth, and may be able to help out in different ways, strategic alliances, partnerships, outright philanthropy, and so forth. So, in that sense, the hotel could be a key partner for a small or mid sized community, whatever it might be, really, though, in holding charity events and fundraisers, and partially allow the use of some of the facilities of the hotel uh, in these partnerships. And so those are certainly some ways that you could build community relationships. Um, what kind of talents are you going to need as the GM to do that? Again, it comes down to the social skills, interpersonal skills, and here maybe the outgoing personality is fine. You don't necessarily have to be a type A personality. In fact, most organizations and businesses today do not want to rely on a type A personality. They tend to be a little too aggressive. What you want is somebody who interacts with others easily in a social setting, is comfortable speaking or listening, and so forth. In other words, someone has good communication and interpersonal skills. And so obviously you would feel comfortable whether you're talking to a group, a large group, or interacting with just a few people, or making a small presentation, whatever it might be. Those are the types of things that a GM is going to be expected to pull off fairly successfully. Well, when it comes to some professional development and things like that, we can do on the job training. And we're talking about doing those sorts of things and setting up programs that benefit not just our EOC team, that executive operating committee team, but also all the other employees, including the assistant managers and the operating employees themselves who get the work of your operation done. Um, This will improve guest service overall, employee performance overall. So we're talking really about all those non-exempt employees who are out there, who are governed by the labor laws and rules and so forth. Um, well, we do see that there are some trends here that GMs definitely have to do on the job training. You want to provide a certain amount of core training, but when it comes to learning a job itself, quite often you will shadow another employee, that type of thing that's on the job training, and do some of that to onboard people and make sure that their jobs are done in a consistent manner and the way that the hotel wants it to be done and so forth to give the best guest service. And so you have to do this because technology is improving all the time and changing all the time. And you have to keep up with it. Um, there is the fact that you do have somewhat of a changing workforce and so forth. Um, that's always happening around the country in all sectors, it does seem. But not just the changing workforce, but changing guest expectations too. Uh, Guests do change over time, and today's guests are a combination sometimes of business and leisure, and they sort of are demanding the amenities that are applicable to both classes of traveler. And so on the job training will help you develop your workforce and so forth. And that's really what it's all about. So it is a technique that is used in some industries, but not so much in others. In the hotel industry, on the job training makes a lot of sense. Particularly, say, what if you're in a hotel operation where you're in the sanitation or hygiene of the rooms and things like that. You're cleaning rooms, you're restocking them, and all of that. That's a perfect sort of example of the type of job you could do on the job training with. Um, Now, what are the professional things that you can do for skills developments and so forth? Uh, the GM themselves will want some professional development and also develop learn some areas where you can provide that for their team as well. So business associations is one place where you can get that. The membership benefits are often excellent. There are a variety of activities and so forth, but there are also professional trade associations and there are trade publications and so forth, things like that. The membership benefits activities of local business associations. Sometimes these include all kinds of helpful things, teaching you new skills, giving you coaching and so forth from other trained people with expertise, things like that, giving out information. Local chambers of commerce are excellent places to go for this sort of development. You can kind of see here many of the different sorts of benefits activities from these associations. Um, Skills enhancement programs, opportunities to network, the timely publications. You can get local economic data, which is really important information that you would want, particularly say if you were going to open up expand operations or you see how the general economic status in the area is and so forth. Uh, Try and find the best management practices, things like that. And then as you can see, looking through the rest of this on the list, there are just so many different things that the various associations like a Chamber of Commerce can do to help you. They can do other things here. Um, as you can see on this list of information, these trade associations, some of them even provide the certification that you need to give you official status, professional status of different types, certification, whether it's educational, social, legislative, and so forth. Um, these sorts of organizations have regular meetings, so you can actually attend them. You can join them or not join them and so forth. Um, but they will have a variety of services that you can get as a member. And generally, these memberships aren't incredibly expensive and so forth. And some don't charge anything for these sorts of things. Um, The local chamber of commerce might be the one association in any small community or medium that puts on the local trade show and so forth. And that gets participation from a lot of area businesses and enterprises to pick, particularly whatever the theme is, or if it's broad-based or whatever. And then, of course, they will be the place where they can tell you what are the trade publications if you don't happen to know, and then maybe a place where you can read some or borrow some or get access to some online through their database. And so they can give you all sorts of news and on information and practices, trends, ways to go about doing things, and so forth. In other words, a great place for you to keep up and learn some of the things that you need to do. Um, Let me give you a few examples of professional trade associations just affiliated with the hotel industry. For instance, the American Hotel and Lodging Association, that's the AH in LA, the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, the International Hotel and Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association, the American Culinary Federation, the Hotel Sales and Marketing Association International, and the Hospitality Finance and Technology Professionals Association. Um, these are all professional convention management association affiliated with the lodging sector. And so lots of different trade associations, not just the community-based ones, but the industry-based ones and so forth. And so um, like any industry, any sector, you want to do your environmental scanning, whether you're a manager or running an operation or not, keep up with current events, keep up with things that affect your particular sector and business. Um, Hiring a GM, because the actual duties performed by GMs can be so varied depending on size and complexity, amenities offered, etc., job descriptions are absolutely essential that they're perfect, that they're descriptive, because the job description has got to legally detail the responsibilities and requirements for each position in the hotel, including that of the GM. So if it's a select service hotel, for instance, um, summary of the position is going to be required. And you're going to have to mention things like responsible for generating profit to meet or exceed budget expectations while maintaining operational and guest service standards. You're going to have to mention specific duties, such as required to develop, administer, and control hotel revenue and expense budgets, uh, required to analyze a balance sheet, statement of cash flows, income statement. So that's that area of financial measurement I was talking about early on. You've got to have qualifications. So it may be required that a minimum of at least 3 years experience previously as a GM of a select service hotel in this case, with a minimum of 75 rooms or more. Must have budgeting, forecasting responsibilities, some sort of financial knowledge. It'd be slightly different if you were trying to find a GM for a full service hotel. It might be written more broadly than that in terms that are more general. Select service, a very specific sort of thing, maybe smaller. Position description, of course, summary of the position again. Uh, and you would mention something like the GM is the key individual in the chain of command with complete responsibility for all activities of the hotel, that you would take charge of all the components of the property's business, that you would serve as a positive role model for the subordinates, so that standards modeling I mentioned, while aggressively protecting the owner's financial interests. So again, that responsibility to succeed, to grow the hotel and the property, and other specific financial type duties, and so forth. So really, when you think about it, the GM uh, has a lot of scope of operations, uh, a very enlarged job when you think about all the things that a GM is responsible for. The greater the size, and therefore then the greater the number of the departments. When that happens, certainly more managements will have to report to you. You will have to hire a larger EOC executive operating committee again to help you facilitate operations and so forth. So this is not a job you would generally start out at or enter into without previous experience. And so, like I said at the beginning, likely this is the culminating job that many in the hotel industry would like to have. Of course, maybe owning a hotel, but being that general manager in a larger operation, perhaps, uh, a real challenge because you really do have a lot of power and an influence in that sense, but more in the sense that you have a lot of influence and that you have a lot of responsibility and that your accountability is likewise quite high as well. Okay, folks, that's all I want to talk about this time. I'll talk to you again soon.